I'll see people coming in. We'll probably chat for just a second to give everybody time to trickle on in. And I appreciate you all who are very timely and came right when you were supposed to. So thank you so much for that. We are so excited to share a topic that's so near and dear to our hearts today, that is leadership, that is identity, that's feedback, using that word or another one, but just really understanding how the world around you sees you and how you can leverage that information really to your great benefit and all the things that you're looking to accomplish. So it's a really big conversation again. So thrilled to have you here. So I'll kick it off with brief introductions. I think it's always kind of goofy being on screen because I wish I could see all the faces, and I know, based on the signups, that for a lot of you who are joining us today, we've either met you before, we crossed paths somewhere. So brilliant to see you again if we have met, and for those of you that maybe we have not, welcome. Thank you for joining the conversation and for being a part of this really important and transformative topic when it comes to the future of work. And so I'll introduce myself first as a semi-host with my two, now I can say best friends after a few years of really collaborating and flying around the world together. Al and Dan and I met at different stages in life, all related to future work, people analytics, and now fast forward some years, I feel like we've created this community where we get to spend a lot of time together, amongst us and this larger group of individuals talking about topics we're passionate about. So my name is Sonia Lucina. I am the president of Question Pro Workforce. I'm an organizational psychologist, somebody who's incredibly passionate about making the world of work better. And I have this incredible opportunity to be able to do this working at Question Pro, that is actually a survey technology company. We are doing market research all the time to understand what's going on with people globally. What is it that people are looking for in jobs? Are we going back to the office? Are we not going back to the office? How do we focus on career development? And so much more. And then taking all of that great insight and working with our clients to help them build incredible cultures, to help their leaders develop. And just whenever people wake up, our goal is that they're passionate, they love their job, they love what they're doing. And so that's what I spend my waking hours in my career on, is really working with organizations to help them create a culture where leaders and employees thrive. So welcome again to our webinar. And Dan, I'll pass it on to you to introduce yourself next.
Perfect. Well, amazing introduction. And before we even get going, I'm seeing people coming on to the chat. Where are you from? I always love to know. I think we have a pretty global set of folks joining us. So just drop into chat, where you're from, and drop into chat questions along the way, comments. We want this to be interactive. So please
Yeah.
do that. I am Dan Riley, as Sonia mentioned. I'm the co-founder of a company called Radical. And simply put, we inspire organizations to, what we say, defy gravity and rewrite the work story. And I'm going to talk more about this, but we believe organizations can do better and must do better for the people who they employ. And we work with organizations from small to large around the world, helping them to unlock their energy and their purpose and their impact. So today I'm super excited to talk about the power of identity and leadership. This is critical to the success of any organization. So I know the three of us have some great presentations ready to roll, but most importantly, it's just some really good conversations, and we want you to join us. So please come in with questions, thoughts. Let's make it interactive, and so happy to be here. And yes, Sonia, best friends, absolutely. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you for a few years. So virtual hug to you and a big hello to all of our panelists.
Thank you. And Al, on to you.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking time. I know it's extremely valuable, and I want to make sure, as do Sonia and Dan, to get the most out of your experience today. if you've joined, you have some passion or ideas, or it's affecting your life in some way, that being growth mindset, leadership, feedback, identity. So we're going to get into research. We're going to get into ideas on how to think about it for yourself and others. If you don't know me, I am the founder of PAVAO, People Analytics Future of Work. I've more recently founded something called My Future of Work, which has a value proposition for individuals, teams, groups, and organizations. We'll speak more about that as we wrap, but ultimately it starts with understanding oneself and how organizationally or at scale we can employ techniques like 360 to better understand oneself, and how to employ not only feedback, but how to create an openness and willingness to learn so we don't take defensive posture. So without going further, I'll kick it back over to Sanya to kick us off.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. And I was just checking. I love the global community. That's probably one of the things that I enjoy the most. So I popped in later after Dan so kindly reminded me about the locations. That's usually the first thing I'll say. I'm in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I'm originally from Serbia, and I lived in the US for 20 some years in London. And so being a global citizen is really a really big part of my identity. You really talk about it a lot, so I didn't use it in my intro. But now that Dan mentioned it, I figured I'd jump in with it too. So thank you for that, Dan. It always really warms my heart to see people all around the world rallying for this good cause and this thing we all believe in and what we want to really move ahead and advance. And so Dan and Al alluded a little bit to how we're going to spend our time today. I know it's not always easy when we are virtual, but please, if you are passionate about something, if you want to share, we're constantly monitoring the chat. If you want to jump in with any questions, any thoughts, our time here is really for you. We have a story that we want to tell. We want to share things we're passionate about, but really we're doing that in more of a public forum to spread that knowledge and also gain that knowledge from all of you. So what we'll cover today is, as Al was mentioning, mental models, research. I think I need another coffee. Research, all the different resources around when you're really thinking about how you define yourself, especially as a leader. How do you do that? And for any of you that are connected with me on social media, you might have seen a lot of around my soul searching, both as an over individual, as a leader, some of the practices I've gone through. So we're going to share a lot more about that today. What do we consider as exceptional leaders today and moving ahead? I think we've all seen this huge shift over the last several years, and maybe how somebody was defined as an exceptional leader about 20 years ago is no longer the case today. So when we're thinking about and reevaluating that identity and who we really want to be, what's important to consider, what's going on around us. And then, of course, feedback 360s, as I mentioned, that's one of the areas we're really passionate about. And it's this really great way to use it as a mirror to say, this is the person I want to be. This is who I'm working on creating. How am I doing? Because our own perception is incredibly important, but it's one. And so how do we effectively leverage our community? How do we effectively leverage the people who we interact with the most to not only be a mirror to us, but this incredible resource to really help us grow and evolve into who we want to be? So we already covered quick intros on how we'll spend our time today. So there's a check there. And Al, Dan, and I all prepared some slides because we're joking. We do a lot of live shows and a lot of podcasts, and it's a lot more freestyling. Today is a webinar. And so our expectation was that you'll come and maybe you'll want to take some notes and we'll send the slides out. But to have something really concrete, a takeaway that you feel like you can reference back, that's something like, maybe this is a good book that I'll read, or this is something that I'll look into more. So we'll go into about 20, 30 minutes of presentation. Very few slides for all of us, so hang in there. It won't be overly exhaustive presentation. And then again, we'll have an open discussion. And a lot of it, imagine we had a few prep calls before this webinar. And I think in the last one, just Dan, Al, and I, and Guille ran like an hour and a half over just talking about the topic and just us. So we will stick to an hour today, I promise you. But please, if again, if you want to be a part of that discussion today, feel free to jump in. Of course, we'll share all of our contact information afterwards. We're accessible for discussions offline as well. But if there's anything you're passionate about today that you'd like to contribute, again, I want to keep reiterating that this is a community that we're building. It's an open conversation. So we'd absolutely love to hear from all of you. So with that said, Al's going to really kick us off with framing more around leadership. What's the state? How do we do that self-discovery? So Al, I will turn it over to you, and I will be driving the slides. So if you ever see anything goofy where it's like, that's not Al saying, I'll catch up. We practice a little bit when I do the clicking. We'll see how well I do.
Yeah, well, Sanya, thank you for teeing that up. And again, thank you all for being here. I'm going to be quick, meaning like 5 minutes. And so I'm going to race through some things, but I want to do so to set the stage for Dan and Sanya and to inspire some discussion towards the second half of our talk. With that in mind, I just want to ask up front, how am I showing up for you? What's my identity for you right here in this moment? You might have some indicators based on what's behind me. And I created that very consciously because I want to show up in the world as someone who is inclusive, who is going to celebrate the individual, celebrate contributions of friends and colleagues and those who have inspired me. Behind me, that's Rob Cross, the Microstress Effect. That's Thomas Chamorro, Prayer Music, iHuman, Keeping Human in the Age of AI. Some of us, Heather McGee, who's all about the downside of racism in not only American society, but around the world and how it's costing everybody. So I want to, and obviously I'm a volleyball player and basketball player. And so this is the case for us as individuals. To what extent are we consciously showing up and consciously nurturing our own identity? And similarly, as we view other people, whether it be a leader or a colleague or someone who's a direct report to us, if we're enrolled as a leader, are we creating a safe space for them to move with intention? So the slide that you have up here is, as you reflect today, how do you see yourself? How do you talk about yourself? What's the self-talk? What's the talk that you share with friends? Do you value yourself and honor your virtuous contribution to the world? Or is there a loud self-critic? When you talk about and feel a certain way and you put words to yourself, is it aligned with your intention and who you want to be? Do you believe that how you view yourself is fixed? Or is it malleable? And there's a host of resources that I'm going to sprinkle in. So if you want to take notes as we go, we certainly will. But one of the ones that comes to mind right now is Steven Pinker, psychologist out of Harvard, wrote a book called The Blank Slate, which is effectively Western society's ignorance of human nature. Like, we do have certain ways of being, and not that that puts us in a box, but it does identify areas where we can have strengths and certain skills and ways of being that can serve as assets. So to identify those and celebrate those. As a father, that's been one of my challenges, is to see what is wonderful within my kids and elevate and celebrate that. And finally, do I define myself by titles or outcomes, or by the character and intentions? In other words, the process by which I try and achieve those outcomes. Similarly, as we view others, Sanya, if you can go to the next slide.
Maybe. Hold on.
Maybe.
I got
I'm rooting
it.
for it. These are the same questions, but put within a different context. How do I see others? How do I talk about others? Am I meeting someone for the first time and then putting them into a box because cognitively and emotionally it makes me comfortable? And do I then condemn them and do not allow them room to shift and change? So if I am a leader, am I taking in the perceptions of others and owning them in a way that's unhealthy? So how do I, again, create space so I can actually gracefully let some things go and take in what is most appropriate and valuable? Next slide, Sanya, please. So what I encourage everybody to do, and this is based on my own self-work. So I meditate and I practice mindfulness to the extent that I can. And it is something that is a constant learning journey for me, of course, and it is for everyone who practices mindfulness. That said, one of the things that has been a staple is this notion of shrinking the inner critic and elevating the compassionate witness. And there's some descriptors underneath these, which I won't read verbatim, but just suffice it to say, the inner critic has a role and it's trying to do good. However, if you own that as the overarching narrative about yourself or others, that's not healthy. What is more healthy is to elevate the lens of the compassionate witness, that view that just observes what's happening in a non-judgmental way. And then when it tries to understand what's happening, then it does so in what I call compassionate curiosity. You're looking for what's right as opposed to what's wrong. So again, celebrating others as opposed to, oh, that's wrong, and I'm going to fix it. That's not a healthy way to be when we interact as humans. So Sanya, next slide. And this is where I'm going to wrap up. So identity, and this is where it's important for us to define feedback. And Sanya and I have gone back for years on really trying to hone what this actually means, because I will say probably for the rest of my life that feedback, given its prevalence, is grossly ill-defined, and I don't like it. However, as we're going to discuss today, there is a lot of benefit that can come from it if it is defined in the right way, both by the individual who's giving it and the person who is receiving it. So let me explain. Feedback historically is, okay, someone is going to provide their perception of what happened, and they're going to tell them, that individual, what to do. So here, in that case, there's no curiosity. They're coming from a knowing place. They're going to tell somebody what to do. And that's going to come as a criticism, and the person is going to perceive it negatively. They're going to perceive it and push it away from them. So at the end of the day, we're all fellow humans. So fellow human one is going to have their way of giving feedback and their idea. The next one is going to have the next one. The next one is going to have the next one. So we are going to perceive all this, and then we're going to develop a coherent narrative. We're going to try and make it make sense for us. And once we do that, and if it's a negative criticism overriding, oh, I'm going to have feelings that they don't trust me. And that's going to fuel a belief system where, oh my gosh, I don't have any agency. I'm inadequate. I don't belong. I am not enough. And finally, that is going to turn into a disempowered identity where I just don't feel that I belong here, that I'm going to want to escape. So there's a different, better way to do this. So Sanya, if you can do a couple clicks. So what I advocate are OQIs, observations, questions, and ideas, where those same humans or different humans, so you're good, you can keep going forward. Those same people or different people, if they frame feedback differently through OQIs, here's observation, compassionate witness, stay in that compassionate curiosity, then offer ideas. Then the individual has the ability, the choice on whether or not to take on those ideas. Now I'm developing a different coherent narrative that makes sense to me. And that's going to inform, saying the next one, sorry, that, hey, these people believe in me. They're empowering me. They're giving me a sense of agency. I got this. And finally, again, the identity I have is now empowered. And so that's a very different way to think about and approach the notion of feedback that's going to elevate one's sense of self, their worthiness, the feeling that they belong. But again, that takes really defining what feedback is. So Sanya, I'll kick it over to you, and I know Dan's got some slides. So thank you.
Perfect. I love that, Al, and this slide is up. I'm not good. Before I start talking about the slide, I just want to say a few things. I love that kind of when we think about feedback, and I know the word can be, the interpretation of the word over the years has been good and bad and neutral, but the best feedback is when it's personal, and Al, you alluded to this, And when someone truly cares about giving the feedback and they believe in you, and I'm going to tell a really fast personal story. I did a post about this, and then I'm going to add, so some of you may have read this, but I want to share it, and then I'm going to ask a quick question to the community. But I'll try to keep my story to about a minute. I have a long career now in HR and technology and everything in between. I started my career. I'd like to think I always had pretty good ideas and you know, relatively intelligent, but I was very shy. There were a few things I was very good at and not shy at all. And one of those was playing really heavy, loud music on rock stages. I was a musician, and still am a musician, but I did a lot more performing back in the day. And at work, I would show up as a little bit of an introvert, quiet, and yet I had such an opportunity to speak more and speak up more. And the woman who I was reporting to, this is at United Health Group, and I'm going to call her name out because I think it's important, right, to recognize those who changed our lives for the better. Her name is Joan Moe, and she came to see me play at one of the nightclubs I was playing at. And then at our next one-on-one, her feedback to me was, Dan, I didn't even seeing you on stage was night and day. Your confidence, your energy, you own the stage, right? Right? Because you believed in the music you were playing, you wanted everybody to hear it, and you wanted to interact with the crowd. So it was a give and take, all the above. She said, so next time you're in a meeting and you have an idea, pretend everybody in the room are those who are watching you play music. And all of a sudden it sort of turned a light bulb on in my head. Like, yeah, I have ideas, be confident. And it's okay to bring up an idea and be off or a little wrong too. I mean, the best ideas come from just being willing to say it and bring it up. And that's how the best teams, the best organizations grow. So a quick question for all of you. If you think back to incredible leaders in your life who have changed you, what's the one thing that they did for you? If you could just put it into chat. For me, it was confidence. Mm-hmm. And so if you want to put a sentence, that's fine too, but I'm looking for single words. What are things that you learned from people in your life, your leaders, current or past, that changed your life? What are some words? And just start dropping that into chat. Slow down, okay? Yeah, I love that, Jenny. That's a great one. The power of believing in others. Yes, we have to believe in others. It's the only way. Voice, love it. Empowerment, all day long, empowering others. Confidence, Sonia, yes, confidence. We'll keep dropping them in. I don't want to spend too long with my slides, but I just do want to, I guess, end by saying feedback is a gift. It's a gift to receive it, and it's a gift to be able to provide it to somebody. Again, if you believe in the feedback that you're giving and it's meant to be helpful. If it's not meant to be helpful, the person receiving it is not going to take it, and you probably shouldn't be giving it. So that would be my quick high level on that quote unquote word feedback. So this slide, I just want to quickly go through the landscape of work a little bit. I think this helps to set up our conversation around leadership. We know, and I'm going to make a bold statement, that work is broken in a lot of ways. And please know, when I say work is broken, I'm not suggesting work also isn't beautiful, because it is. We get an opportunity to do what we love and meet incredible people and humans and explore and create and ideate and all the above. But there's a lot of broken elements to work, and it's broken for these reasons, these words that you see around around the center. So trust, right? If trust breaks down more often than not. And why is that, right? And that's because we're not giving honest feedback as often as we could, and leaders don't step in a proactive way as they should. Productivity, right? If we're not being productive or feeling productive, and that's has so much to do with connectivity and being cohesive as an organization, which again requires understanding who you are, your strengths, your superpowers, and having incredible leaders around you, right? That helps with productivity. Efficiency speaks for itself. Well-being, we have to, leaders have to listen more. Listening is the most important thing a leader can do. I'll say that again. Listening is the most important thing a leader can do. So, and paying attention. So from a well-being standpoint, if someone needs time, if someone needs space, right, this isn't happening enough. Skills, teams, right? The organization of teams has been breaking down, and the fragmentation across HR. That's a whole nother webinar we could talk about. Of course, the world of remote now over the last 3 or 4 years has been an incredible opportunity for work, but also has cracked some things within work, because some organizations just are struggling with that, and understandably. So we can move on to the next slide. We believe, and we did a study with Question Pro, so Radical and Question Pro did a study. And what we asked was, and I'm not going to get into too much of the data, please reach out for more of a report on this, but we wanted to understand how many people are out there are feeling like they do have a radical work experience. And how do we define a radical work experience? It's defined by 6 elements. Reason, right? So feeling connected to the larger purpose, right? And that's that middle ground, that common ground, right? We can all rally around the reason the organization exists, regardless of our belief system, regardless of who we are. We know there's so much polarization that is out there, but we can push that aside and all believe in something together, like that reason. And feeling like I'm accomplishing something, meaningful work, having clear direction, right, around what I'm doing, what I should be doing. And all these things require leadership. Identity, right? We're focusing a lot on that today, right? And this identity is feeling valued. Who am I? See me, hear me, understand what's important to me. I see you, I hear you, I understand what's important to you. So belonging as a person. Connections, right? And these connections, it's not just I know you, but I trust you. Right? So there's a difference between just being connected to somebody versus having a true connection with them that's based on trust. And then an opportunity to constantly be learning, right? And growing and regenerating. And unfortunately, what we found is only 21% of those in our study define their current work experience as being a radical work experience. So we have work to do, we have opportunity to do, and this takes a commitment to leadership, and not just leadership, it's a commitment that we all need to make. So one more slide just to help kind of back up these 6 elements, and I'll roll through this really fast, but if we have more purpose, right? Obviously this drives more engagement, higher success. And we understand and we know that 82% of people in the workforce want more purpose from work. Accomplishment is the #1 motivator in meaningful progress. Direction, understanding, again, when I show up, what should I be focused on? What should I be doing? Or employees, workers are 4.5 times happier with having a clear direction and clarity. Identity, we have a 75% lift for inclusive whole person experience. So those who can show up as they are, who they are, feel like they're seen, feel like their voice is heard, feel like their values are understood. There's a 75% lift, right, in experience. That is incredible. Connection, 50% higher productivity. and organizations that are connected based on trust, right? If I trust you, that connection and the way teams operate and function and flow is just through the roof. And learning, 76%, think of that number, 76% of people are going to stay and hang around for more opportunity to learn and develop themselves and themselves. And that also has so much to do with who they are and their identity and who they want to become and where they want to be and the skills they want to learn. So that's the radical work experience. And the data sort of speaks for itself, and we have opportunity and work to do there. So I think I have one more slide. I might not. Let's move to the next. Yes. So I've already talked about this super fast. Mindset. Everything starts with mindset, right? So change requires a willingness and a commitment to say, I'm here. I want to be over there, and it takes courage to say that and to say I'm going to go through this change process. It takes that connection, right? Any change we make in our life, anything, I don't care what it is, you need people around you who support you, who you're connected to. Those are the people who lift you up when you fall, not fail, but when you fall. A sense of being humble, right? Showing up, being able to say, I don't know how to get there. Help me. Bringing empathy, which means kind of Al spoke about this, is with the polarization and differences of opinion, being able to learn and listen to somebody, listen, right? The key word there. Being transparent, you have to, that's bringing trust into any conversation. And then, of course, being committed. And if we do this, we build energy, right? We can build and develop a personalized experience, right? And there's a commitment that leaders need to make to help get us there. We ignite change, right? That's where change happens. And then we calibrate because we do get stuff wrong and leaders get stuff wrong. And that's the feedback loop, right? And again, I put feedback in quotes, but we have to constantly be willing to calibrate. If we didn't calibrate, if we just assumed this is what we need to do, we're going to do it, done, close the door, a terrible approach, right? We're constantly learning, we're constantly evolving. So energy, personalization, personalizing, it doesn't mean at the individual level, it means listening to the larger needs of the organization and different parts of the organization. And then ignition and calibration. So those are my slides. 12 those. So I think I will hand the mic over to you, Sonia.
Back to me, thank you. And there's so much to unpack here, Dan. And I think, when you first started talking and saying work is broken, to me, like at first it takes my breath away because I'm like, oh. And then after that moment, I'm like, but wow, there's so much opportunity. That means there's so much opportunity to do things better. And I was just looking up because I couldn't, my brain is a little sleepy today. I couldn't remember the name of the book. I'm right now reading Happier Hour by Cassie Holmes. And when I started reading that book, the first reaction was like, I wish I wrote this. It's amazing. And it talks so much about how we perceive different things in our experiences, and work is one of those things that most people find meaningful, but not enjoyable. I'm like, oh man, and not to talk again about how many hours we spend working and the cascading effect it has on the rest of our lives. But to me, there's hope there. There's hope in how we think about it. There's hope that there are a lot of things that we individually can do. Like, so I, as Sonia, is showing up to work, how I think about it, how I choose mindfully to do different things and what I engage in. But then also for a lot of you on this call, you're leaders, you are colleagues, you impact others. Maybe you're in the culture or HR team. So you have, even as a part of your day job, this greater opportunity to impact things for the better. So I think it's a little bit of a thought around, well, what's the baseline today and where can we make that, biggest difference? And I love all the things that you're sharing, because I do think that there are some things where we say, well, of course this makes sense for work, but then when you look at any, employee scores or surveys or any other data, it's like, well, maybe it's a no-brainer to do it, but yeah, we might still not be doing it as effectively as individuals and as organizations. So I'm going to take that initial panic and, retargeted thinking around opportunity and just like, wow, that almost everything that we do has this tremendous opportunity to change things for the better. So thank you. Again, there's a lot of data and so much to unpack. So I'll lead us through the rest of the slides and then again open it up for discussion, both for all of you who have joined as well as the three of us. So one of the things, that we talked about, feedback or whatever, we'd like to call it, is getting other people's perspectives around how can we do better? How can we show up better? How are we doing? Now, in preparation for this webinar, I did more reading, and you probably feedback and, reviews and everything is one of those things because of my education and just what I've dedicated my career to. You can wake me up in the middle of the night and I'll be able to tell you a lot about it. But I still think that there's a lot of literature out there. We're always finding new things. And what was interesting is, the first was around how do you ask the questions? And one of the things is framing it. And so, Al, one of the very sincere things he said to me as we were preparing these slides was, hey, I saw some of the letters, like even the word feedback, and it gave me this reaction that was maybe not the most positive. And I said, oh, I know what you mean. So, how do we think about, aside from using the word that's maybe most common in our vocabulary, how do we really reframe it and define what we're talking about? And so, I was even thinking back, I'm a huge fan of one-on-ones, and Guille, who's helping us organize this webinar, knows she's on my team, and we have one every week without fail, never get too busy. We get together, and, with all of my team, something that I could get better with is really having those constructive conversations. And maybe they're not for every week. Like, Gia, what can I do better to support you this week? Like Sonia just told you last week. But to make space for that and to really be mindful about the words that we use. So I might have, said, hey, do you have some feedback for me? Which was like, oh, I don't know, do I? But if you frame it in such a way, what can I do to support you better? In many ways, it makes it about the other person. And it doesn't say, well, tell me what I'm doing badly. Tell me, the one thing that drives you nuts every time we have a one-on-one, but how can I show up for you differently? And asking questions like that, I think, really creates, again, we talk about psychological safety. It makes it a discussion. It puts somebody's guard down. Now, like, oh, do I really want to tell Sonia this? Because what if she takes it the wrong way? What if she gets mad and I actually maybe don't mean it? And what if I do have something tough to tell her? What's going to happen after that? And so that choice really creates a different mindset. More so, do you have any feedback for me? Like, I don't know, like where do I go with that? Something else that I was reading about a lot, and I have a strong opinion on it, so I'll share it here, is I believe it's important to ask both for positive behaviors and opportunities. And in some of the reading that I was doing, their philosophy is like, well, you don't need a pat on the back. You're not asking for like a recognition. And there is a difference. There's a difference in saying, hey, you did a really amazing job, as compared to, hey, I thought you were very thoughtful in how we developed this part of the product. And, thank you so much for being involved in the right places. Thank you for giving me autonomy. I really appreciate that autonomy. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness when we needed you. That's positive ideas. That's positive. This is what helped me. I think that there is place for that. Again, there's philosophies that say, why would you want to ask something positive? Like, ask for constructive things. I do think in that conversation as humans too, when you have an opportunity to say something good, it makes maybe saying something that's, maybe a little more challenging easier. Not only for the person receiving that information, I think sometimes it's almost even tougher for the person giving it, depending on your personality and who you are. You're exposing yourself and you're saying, well, how much benefit I'm going to get from that. Maybe this information that I'm sharing with the other person won't even necessarily impact me directly, but if we're having this conversation, I'm able to share something positive. I'm more likely to share an opportunity as well. I know there are big cultural differences there. So as I mentioned, I've lived in different places, and US comes to mind, where it's usually, the nice feedback, the not so nice feedback, the nice feedback. And you know what? If that works culturally, like, I'm in. Whatever allows a person to feel safe to share something, let's go with it. My experience working in Germany a little different. Like, oh, I think this is lovely. Okay, get to the point. Um, so I think that there is some cultural sensitivity in there. And so I think do what works for you, do what works for your surrounding, but in my opinion, do ask for where you're doing well, because I do think in many ways that's something that's gonna continue to help you stand apart. This is a big one too. Listen and reflect. Don't respond or justify. And so I'll talk about this again, but oftentimes receiving something that's a developmental opportunity that you could be doing better, it doesn't even have to be harsh criticism, but all of us are trying really hard, at least most of the time, if not all of the time. And so when something comes up, it's like the initial reaction usually is like, oh, it's not like, yes, like what I said, even with Dan, like work's broken. And I was like, oh, my heart. But hey, that means we have a big opportunity. So that's that, what Al was talking about too, like that exercise of listening, that exercise of really taking things in, letting them sink in, and then acting on it and not, jumping in right away with any but no, like, I'm sorry that I always talk. It's an education opportunity, or I'm sorry that I don't get the team members, a chance to talk. No, take it all in, reflect, and then report back. And that reporting back and follow up is critical. And so, again, I mentioned I do a lot of employee surveys. And what we talk about in that world is whenever you get the data, make sure you tell, all the people who were so kind to take a survey, so kind to, make their recommendations, what you're going to do with it. And it's the same thing with feedback. When people are so kind and sometimes brave to share their sincere opinions, suggestions, advice, take time to reflect, and then say, hey, you know what you said to me was really valuable. And it's maybe something that I've been thinking about for a while, but this really resonated. And so here's some things that I'm going to do. Now, here's another thing that I think sometimes we're scared to ask because we're like, we're going to open the floodgates and now I have to address everything. And that's not true. You're not going to have to act on every piece of information. I would address, if possible, much like what I'm going to act on and why, what I'm not going to act on today and why too. Because I think what happens is if somebody asked you for that advice, if somebody asked you for their opinion and you shared it and then nothing happens with it, again, like employee surveys, are you going to make yourself vulnerable again? There's usually a reason why somebody is not doing something. And so to make that more obvious, make it more vocal, I think is a really important part of that process. So I wanted to shift to very briefly a case for company sponsored 360s, right? So a lot of the recommendations and what I was talking about is in one-on-one conversations, and it's something that all of us can walk away and start doing today. Now, there is again a little bit of a time issue. Okay, so if I want to get feedback from 20 people, maybe that's 20 hours, levels of comfort. When am I going to do it? Oh, I didn't get to it. It starts to be less of a priority. So another reason is because it can be really hard. You might think, okay, I'm going to do it in this one-on-one and I didn't get to it. Okay, I'll get to it next time. Sometimes those who can use feedback the most are also least likely to be proactive. So what does that mean? You have a leader, you have a colleague where you're like, oh, I wish they would have just do this a little differently. I don't know how to say it to them, but they're also not asking me. And so, there goes the opportunity. But if they just knew this one thing, or maybe if, a few people would tell them, they would be so much better for that. But I really value them as a person, but you get it. So there's all this doubt around should I, could I, would I? Um, this is one thing that I actually took from Al that I think was very, very important, is that there may be somebody that will even proactively come and give you feedback, even if you don't ask for it. Now, what's an important thing to know is it is a one person's opinion, or is it really how you come off in general to different individuals? Because it could be one very vocal person, but maybe that's their perception. Maybe the way you interact is different than others. And so before you take stake of taking that one data point and maybe really shifting in some significant ways who you are, it's important to have that more of that information. Um, So, usually, what happens with company sponsored programs and why I think that it's valuable is that all these reasons why we might avoid getting information because we're nervous about what we're going to hear. What are we going to do with it? How do we open up that conversation? How do we share that with someone? Is it just that one person's opinion? When an organization initiates it, you get more of that mass information. So, you don't have to initiate all the conversations. You don't have to have the many hours of asking for advice, asking for feedback. And a lot of times, the way that the information is pulled through can be more structured, more valuable. It could be as simple as you really getting a report again with a lot more people's input. And it can go vary the spectrum from there to a debrief session, a training, a coaching scenario, but it helps people really pull through that change because as Dan was saying too, change is really hard. And so one of the questions as we were preparing, Dan asked me, "Well, what is it about Question Pros 360 that really changes people behavior?" And I gave a very like maybe unusual answer. And I said, "You know what? I don't think it does. What it does is it gives you this brilliant, brilliant way to collect information and get all these insights, but you're only going to change if you want to. There's no technology, there is no AI." And actually, I was thinking about that today. I didn't put a photo in, but I remember like back in the days, those exercise machines that would put that tire around your waist and shake you. Like, it almost made me think of that. Like, exercise only works. You can join a gym, but you have to go and want to do it and follow certain things. There's not a technology that's gonna, shake you into being better leader. But what it does do is really give you this means of getting to where you want to be with much better information and support. And so again, in doing some of the research and reading, I love this example from the Netflix CEO. So most organizations I work with don't the CEO doesn't necessarily do a company-wide 360. So that's why I thought that this was a nice standout example. And I love how he addressed it. Again, what I was mentioning, that follow-up. And like he said, I find the best comments for my growth are unfortunately the most painful. And thank you for your bravery, for your honesty. It's true and sad and frustrating that I keep doing this, but I'll keep working on it. I love the vulnerability. And think about it, it's from a brilliant CEO of a large company that asked every single person he works with for advice and publicly addressed it after. And you know what? He's not alone in saying that it's painful, and the people that their bravery and honesty is really what is going to make the biggest difference. And so I'll end my part with this and then I'll open it up for discussion. I love Liz's graphics. I think Adam Grant actually uses them quite a bit. So I just started following her on LinkedIn. If you don't, I would suggest, because she's brilliant. And so to me, this is it. Here, she uses the words criticism. I would say that it can be replaced with feedback. I think, to Al's earlier point, sometimes I think the challenge with the word feedback and just the notion of it is no matter what you call it, you could call it a banana. If somebody tells you something that's not pleasant for you to hear, it's going to be not pleasant for you to hear. It could be, I have some rainbow to share with you. You could be really doing this better. But know that that process, that initial reaction, that initial maybe sadness or disappointment. Again, I'm working so hard. I can't believe there's still, there's this thing that I need to work on and I've known for a while and I thought I got farther. I recently publicly admitted that I've been working on perfectionism my entire life, and it's this ugly thing. It's ugly. It sounds like that, weird weakness that somebody says like, "Oh, what's your weakness?" "I'm a perfectionist." "No, give me a real one." In my life, it's really manifested itself in some tough ways, and I thought through a lot of work, I've got this. Like, I think it's something that, used to weigh me down when I'm younger. I'm better now. Turns out not true. It just manifested itself in a different way, but it's through doing more self-work, self-reflection, getting that feedback from others that I realized that. And you know what? It made me so sad. It was an incredible, incredible bummer, but I'm so glad that I know, because without doing any of that work, I would have been like, cool, got over my biggest developmental opportunity, move over to the next. Um, And that's actually not the case. So I'll stop screen sharing for a little bit. I know there's been some things going in chat. I haven't been looking at them because I can't talk and read at the same time. I can only do one. And then we'll pop back into the screen share and I'll share some of our contact information before we wrap up. But just wanted to bring you guys back in, see if anything's come up that we want to address and just your general thoughts and any starting of the last kind of takeaways. We still have about 10 minutes.
So Sanya, if I can jump in and thank you, and thank you, Dan, as well. I just want to call something out very quickly. First off, I don't want anybody's feedback. I really, honest, as a 55-year-old man, I don't want it. You're not. If someone says, "Come to me, hey, may I give you some feedback?" The answer is a hard no. It's a hard no. And what I do want are your perspectives and ideas, because I care about you as a human being. I want to learn. I want to know how I show up. So having the wherewithal to advocate for yourself and know that sometimes there's going to be ideas or criticisms that are going to come at you that, to your point, Sanya, that you don't have to take on, that you can gracefully let go. And so that then informs our identity. And one of the reasons I can say this as a 55-year-old man, and like I'll it's not that I disagree with Reed, but the most valuable feedback that I have ever received has been about my goodness. Yeah. And I've allowed me to step into my goodness and thus elevate and empower me. Yes, certainly there's been things that I haven't done as well. And there's this notion of convergent validity. If I have enough people that I like and trust who are telling me the same thing, either via survey or directly, then okay, I should probably shift that particular behavior or way of being. However, if there's somebody who's coming at me and they're out of the blue and it's about their agenda, and this is the final thing I'll say, so many times a leader direct report relationship, hey, I'm going to give you some feedback, do this. And now I'm taking care of that leader. Now, if I don't do what that leader says, then I'm not listening, that I'm not doing the right thing. And that reverses the dynamic. Now I'm trying to help the leader and the leader's not really helping myself. So really understanding this dynamic, and this leverages like Mindful and Adam Grant, Brene Brown and Anyan Shankar, who did a fantastic job with Andrew Huberman on the Andrew Huberman podcast, and she studies and researches identity, which I can't recommend enough. So anyway, long story short, let's engage in this process in a very aware, conscious way, and then benefits arise. But just to assume that taking on feedback is a good thing without this thoughtfulness, I think it'd be counterproductive.
Absolutely.
I love that. And before I have just one thing I want to add on to that. Again, please, chat is open. If you have questions for us, we have about 10 minutes. Drop it in and we'll do our best. And if we can't get to your question, we promise we will respond to you with as thoughtful of a response as we possibly can. Al, just listening to you talk, and the word that comes to mind for me is self-awareness more than anything. And there's a reason why, like, for example, relationship therapy is when you do this, it makes me feel like, right? It isn't, I need you to start doing this. I don't like when you do this. It's someone responding and helping you understand, again, your identity based on a perception and based on true feelings. And I think that type of dialogue across peers, across leadership, is the way to provide really honest and open feedback. It is sort of allowing those to understand truly their identity, their awareness. How do they show up? How does it make others feel? So I'm a big believer in awareness, and then I'm a big believer in context, right? So when we think about identity, helping to put it into context. I feel like this when in this type of context, in this type of scenario. I love that type of feedback, and I agree with you, Al. Like what I don't want is a laundry list of you should. You should do this. You should do this. You shouldn't do that. That's not all that helpful. But what I do love to know is if someone feels a certain way, or if I'm creating a feeling amongst a team, or whether it's positive or not positive, I'd like to know, and I'd like to know why and learn from it. And I think that's how we grow, and that's how we self-develop.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say one more thing and kick it over to you, Sandy, because I know we're coming up on time. In my view, and this is a synthesis or a coming together of my learnings, both business-wise and mindfulness and psychology and so forth. Number one, and Carol Dweck, growth mindset. Number one leadership attribute for me, and this is personal development as well as leadership in business and organization, the willingness and capacity to learn, and in turn, take action on that learning. So willingness is just that, and capacity is, do we have the openness to go there? And we need that, in my view, to be happy and peaceful people, as well as good leaders and those who are going to build a following and get people either individually or in groups or teams where they want to go. So again, self-awareness, organizational, situational awareness, all that, but is rooted in, to your point, awareness. So Sanya?
No, one thing I was going to add, and this visual came to my mind just now, is so for me, like Ali, you were saying, like, I don't want to hear feedback. Like, I'm terrified of feedback. And I think it goes because with my perfectionism, because I care so much to do things so well. And I know I'm not all the time, but then when somebody brings it up, like, it so bums me out. Now, my other philosophy, and I'll tie all this together, is I'm a huge, 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 huge believer that we'll do well in life because of our strengths. That each one of us has something innately that's really good and positive, and then that's helped us get to where we are in our career. That's helped us with relationships. Like, none of us are going to be good at everything, but the sooner we can recognize and know what that really strong thing is, to continue to leverage that even more, that's what's going to make all the difference. Now, I'm also thinking this big smile, like, you're doing this, but do you have a ball and chain tied to your leg, and how big and heavy is that ball? And are you aware that it's there? Are you aware how much it's pulling you back? And the bravery of those around you to say, Sanya, I love your energy. I love your enthusiasm. But girlfriend, if you don't do this one thing, like, you won't be able to jump. You won't be able to thrive because it is holding you back. But if you just are aware of this one thing or two thing or whatever is in that ball, all of a sudden you'll flourish more. And to me, to be aware about that, but also to your guys' point, to critically think about it and not take it all in and say, oh no, I need to do this and I need to do that, but recognize what's elevating you and see if there's something holding you back, and what do you do about that? I think we have to do a little bit of both. It has to be done mindfully, right? Because yes, if somebody tells you in a wrong way, are you going to get defensive? Are you going to say no? But like, wait a minute. So anyways, I just wanted to mention that, because that to me is something that I've always believed, and I'm still trying to figure out how to balance that, right? Like, I don't think any of us, we're sharing things that have worked for us. We're sharing things, research. But if it was easy, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because already everybody would be doing it well. Like, so I
Yeah.
know there's some questions that have been coming in. We only
Yeah.
have 2 minutes left. I don't know if there's anything you guys saw that
Yeah,
you
I
would
just replied to one comment. I'll just wrap this up as and it'll be my closing comments, and we can go, because I know you want to share. First off, I want to thank everybody for being here. To Sanya's last point, this is something that we all practice individually and at scale through 360 feedback instruments and so forth. But what I would encourage you to do is define it for yourself and experience and practice it for yourself. Language, when we talk about identity, how do you perceive yourself? I mentioned earlier Anya Shankar with the Andrew Huberman podcast. If you want to learn more about identity, she's researched the topic, has a beautiful story and narrative around it. So it's essential. If we're in organizational change, HR, we're leaders ourselves, then we need to understand this topic and the latest research. So really appreciate you all being here and giving us a listen. And Dan, kick it over to you.
Yeah. Real fast. Thanks, Al. And again, such a pleasure to be with you both. I love the question about change. I don't think we have time to address it. I would just say, typically with change, if there's a disagreement, if you focus on where you're trying to get, most debate around change is in the journey to get there. We typically agree about what the outcome will look and feel like. Where we disagree is sort of how we get there. So make sure, so I think just, I would always like if imagine an island, we're trying to get there. I want to take a boat, I want to swim, I want to take a helicopter. You can debate that all you want. What do you all want? You all want to be on the island. So that's just a little subtlety. The final thing I'll say is, I talked about this a year or two ago, and I brought up a leadership. As leaders, I urge you all to think about an identity in a leadership role as a how can I help you leader, not what can you do for me leader. And it's just simple language, but it's taking the time. Because when someone is missing a deadline, or someone isn't quite, maybe is struggling, you can address it two different ways. You can kind of say, you need to fix this or else, or you can say, what's going on? How can I help you? And why is this happening? Because life is life, and we all have struggles. And so if you take that approach first, that is I wish every leader was like that. And I urge you all to think about that. And again, thank you to Question Pro, Sonia and Al, great friend for so many years. And Sonia, I'll turn it back to you to close this out.
No, and as you wrap that up, actually, I just wanted to say, if you enjoyed this discussion, and if you think you can be in the Austin area, or if you are in the Austin area on October 26th, we're actually going to be all back together. It's a Question Pro event. Al and Dan and Serena Huang are going to be joining us to lead our employee experience track. We're also going to have sessions on research, customer experience. It's at the Thompson Hotel, so you can learn more at questionpro.com/xday/2023. If you are interested, we do have some free passes for those who attended this webinar, so please send any one of us a note. Again, we'd love to see you there. All of us are such a huge believer in creating this community, sharing the knowledge, and we'd love for you to be a part of that as well. And so here is all of the different ways that you can, get in touch with us if you like. Our email addresses, our LinkedIn. I would say we're all quite active on LinkedIn. I was recently talking to somebody about Instagram, and I was like, oh, I think maybe I'm falling out of the age group for that one. I do post photos of my son in vacation, but if you want to learn anything business-wise, I would say most of us are regarding careers more active on LinkedIn. So thank you, Al and Dan, infinitely always for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, for your time, for your friendship. So it was wonderful to have you here. Thank you all for joining again. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And again, if you can be in Austin in October, we'd love to see you in person.
The cool city. Come join us.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you
you
all.
so much, everybody.
Bye.
Everybody. Yeah.
Take care, and we'll see you
Bye-bye.
soon.